Hey guys, so now is our first new assignment, new information, because yesterday's was just a review over things from spring break. So this unit, which is learning, you have probably heard of a few of these terms. Um, can I minimize this? Minimize. Okay, so this unit learning, well, usually, AP test says to spend around 5 to 7 days covering it. We're not going to cover it that long because, honestly, I'm going to give you some practice to do, but that should cover it. So remember, anytime that you see the word learning on the AP exam, it's going to be under the behavioral approach of psychology. So we've talked about the cognitive approach and the humanistic and social cultural, but behavioral is code for learning. How what you have been taught, what you have been conditioned to do. So those two are synonyms. I want you to really think of that as synonyms. So behavioral is learning, learning is behavioral. Okay, so how does learning occur? These are just some examples. In a second that I'll get to, and then we'll get into the different types of learning. So we learn through association. We associate things that go together. We associate the color red with stopping and the color green with going. We learn through association. So there are three ways that we learn through association. There's classical conditioning, which this lesson is about today. There's operant conditioning, which will be probably tomorrow. And then observational learning, which is really quick, the day after that. So today we're talking about classical conditioning, but there are three types: classical, operant, and then observational learning. So here are some examples of classical conditioning in real life. You don't have to write these down, but you probably are familiar with things like this. So the reason that your mouth waters when you smell freshly baked cookies, your mouth shouldn't water to a scent. Your mouth is when it waters, that's part of the digestive process. So smelling something shouldn't necessarily mean that you're going to digest it. So, but if you smell some really good food and your mouth waters, even just talking about it right now is making my mouth water. If you feel good when you go to a particular spot or something has happened to you that has been a positive experience in the past, and just the opposite, if you get an awful feeling in your stomach when you go to a spot and something bad has happened, you have that association, that emotional response to a particular location. That shouldn't be a thing that happens, but it is because of classical conditioning. When you associate two stimuli, maybe perfume with oh, that's the smell of your grandmother. And then you smell that perfume and then it makes you remember your grandmother or have these really happy feelings. We always have certain smells or that's Christmas, or that's the beach, or something like that. That's classical conditioning. Here is an AP term: taste aversion. When you get food poisoning, you learn to associate a negative feeling towards that type of food, or maybe towards that restaurant, or towards whatever, something that was associated with that experience. And so you develop a taste aversion to it. You no longer the thought of it makes you want to gag, or just smelling it makes you nauseous again. That's how I am with red Gatorade. Usually when I'm sick, like when I have a stomach bug or something, I'll drink red Gatorade to replenish, my electrolytes. But now I can't drink it when I'm healthy, because I immediately start to feel bad when I drink it, because I usually feel sick, and I've associated that taste with the feeling of being sick. So now that taste makes me feel sick. That's taste aversion. Here's a question: who gives the shots? Nurses or doctors? Usually nurses, because you guys are big enough where you can disassociate the person from the pain. But babies, they are probably going to have the same doctor. Well, there's probably like different, like a whole bunch of different nurses that work for the same either hospital or office. And so if you had the same person give you a shot over and over again, you're going to associate the pain with that person and maybe not like the person. You have a negative feeling towards the doctor if the doctor was to give you the shot, but they usually have nurses do it. So and then different nurses, every time you go, because they don't want you to have a negative association with the person. And you need to have a better relationship with your doctor anyway, because they're your doctor. You need to be honest with them. So, classical conditioning is also called Pavlovian conditioning because of the guy named Ivan Pavlov. And there he is. There he is. Handsome fellow. Ivan was not a psychologist. He studied the digestive system of dogs. He actually won a Nobel Prize in physiology for his work with dog digestion, but whatever. So he was working with the same dogs over and over. And what he was doing is he was feeding them at certain times of the day. I forget what his original, but he was trying to measure their saliva. He was trying to measure the saliva that was secreted when dogs eat. Well, he kept, dealing with the same dogs in his experiment, and he realized that these dogs were messing up the experiment. Just him like pouring food into a bowl, just like getting the food in his hand, the dogs started to salivate immediately because they were expecting to be fed. And, he's like, this is messing up because they're salivating. Before I do anything, I'm trying to measure their salivation. Wait, hold on. Are they learning? Are they learning that I'm about to feed them? How do they even know they're dogs? So he was wondering, if the two dogs associated, the bag of food or whatever to food, could he associate something different, something neutral, something random? Could he make the dog salivate to something different? And so would the dog begin to salivate at that neutral thing if he paired it with the food? And turns out, yes. Okay, so if we were in class, I would be showing you this clip right now from The Office where Jim makes Dwight salivate to the sound of his computer booting up. And it's good. So if you can find it, I can't show it in this video because that would be like copywriting. But if you find it on YouTube, it's pretty funny. So here's what he did. Dogs should naturally salivate to food. It's part of the digestive system that naturally happens. They should have no response to a bell, none at all. But what if he paired something, the bell, with the food? So he should naturally respond to the food because it's a dog with food. They're naturally going to have a response. But what if he paired it with this neutral thing, this bell? So what he would do is he would ring a bell like half a second before he would present the food. And he actually wasn't presenting them with food. He was presenting them with meat powder because you couldn't do research for like hours a day feeding a dog. The dog would get full. And so what he would do, think of like beef jerky, but like ground up to like a powder. And so then he would just dab it on their tongue. So it's like giving them the taste without any of the calories, and so it's basically meat powder. It wasn't food. But so after he did this pairing for so long, he realized that just if he rang the bell, because he would ring the bell, give the meat powder, ring the bell, give the meat powder, ring the bell, give the meat powder. After a while, he would ring the bell, not even present the meat powder, but it didn't matter. The dog was already salivating to just the bell. The dog learned to associate the bell with the meat powder. And here is that same picture again. So before conditioning, we have food and salivation. Before conditioning, the bell doesn't do anything. And then you pair them together. Then you pair the food and the bell. And the bell should come first. If you present the food and then ring the bell, it doesn't do anything. The dog doesn't learn to associate the food with anything because they're too busy eating. The bell has to be like right before the food. And it can't be like bell, wait 10 minutes, and then the food, because it has to have like some sort of anticipation. There has to be like, oh, right now is this happening? And then after. Okay, so you see that there's some terms: unconditioned stimulus, unconditioned response, a neutral stimulus. These are all terms that you need to know to be able to identify and define and give examples of on an AP exam. And here they all are: neutral stimulus, unconditioned response, conditioned stimulus, and conditioned response. So it's NS, UCS, UCR, CS, and CR. It's kind of a mouthful, but if you just remember the word conditioned, you've been conditioned to do something. The word conditioned means learned, like you have learned to do this. Okay, so conditioned means it is learned, while unconditioned is like unlearned, but that doesn't mean like you unlearned it. It means that it was natural. It was a thing that you naturally do. Okay. So conditioned means learned. Unconditioned, and you can see my light right here, because you got to get good lighting. Otherwise, conditioned is learned. Unconditioned is natural. Okay, so it's totally natural for a dog to salivate to meat powder. It's what they do. It is not natural. It has to be learned for them to like salivate to a bell. Okay, there's also a couple other terms that it says stimulus and response. Okay, so stimulus, if I can spell it right, is a thing. Like people, place, thing. It's a thing. As I write the word think, while the response is the effect of the thing. It's like cause and effect. Okay, so stimulus is a thing, and the response is an effect of that thing. Okay. So the neutral stimulus being thing, neutral means like it doesn't have any effect. You have not learned it yet. It's not natural. So it's like the bell before the stimulus. So the neutral, or the bell before the experiment. Neutral stimulus is the bell before the experiment. Is the neutral stimulus. It's the bell before the experiment. The bell, you ring a bell at a dog, they're not going to have any response. They're going to look at you and be like, what? Okay, so UCS, UCR, CS, and CR. That's always like in that order. They're going to give you a scenario on the AP exam, and they'll be like, what is the UCS, what's the UCR, what's the CS, and what's the CR? So it's kind of like a pattern. It's almost like a little formula to fill out. So UCS, UCR, CS, and CR. Remember, the UCs, the unconditioned, means natural. While the conditioned, the CSs and the CR, means learned. So what naturally is the thing that naturally has a reaction? And what's the learned thing and the learned reaction? So if we're talking about Pavlov, Ivan Pavlov and his dog, remember how he rang the bell before the meat powder? So that the bell is the neutral stimulus before the experiment. The bell didn't do anything. Unconditioned stimulus, unconditioned response. Let's do those two first. This is natural. So think of what is a natural thing that a dog would naturally have a response to. It's like innate. It is biological. It's part of who they are. It's like natural. So what is the natural thing that dogs naturally respond to in this experiment? Do you know? Okay, well, the natural thing was the food. It was the meat powder. So what's the response to the meat powder? Salivating, drooling. Salivate to the meat powder. So dogs naturally salivate the response to the meat powder. So meat powder is this unconditioned stimulus, and their unconditioned response is to salivate. They're going to salivate to the meat powder. Well, what's the learned thing? Well, what's the learned thing? Here's the thing. The neutral stimulus becomes the conditioned stimulus after the experiment. So eventually, Pavlov is going to pair this neutral thing to the meat powder, and eventually the bell becomes this learned thing. I learned that the bell means meat powder is coming. So the bell is the conditioned stimulus and then conditioned response. After this experiment's over and like it's already taken place, what is the response to the bell? Do you remember what the dog did? The dog salivated. Not this time to the meat powder, but this time they salivated to the bell. Like this. So here's how your UCS, UCR, CS, and CR are going to like work together. It is a UCS meat powder, salivate to the meat powder, CS bell, salivate to the bell. The UCR and the CR are basically going to be the same thing. It's like my natural response and now my learned response to something new, something that used to be neutral. So we're going to do some practice because people always like, it's like a pattern. It's a little like rhythm that you have to figure out. So we'll do some practice here in just a second. Okay. Do I want to? Yeah, I'm going to. Okay. I'm going to come back to this because I said that we're going to do practice and I don't want to wait too long before we do that practice. So I'll come back to this in just a second. Oh, please don't play. Okay, good. Because if this played, I'd be breaking all sorts of rules. Don't touch that. Okay. So, baby Albert. I think I talked about him, I want to say first week of school. He is a famous case study of classical conditioning. It's a different guy this time. It's not Pavlov anymore. Pavlov dealt exclusively with dogs. Baby Albert, he was an experiment done by John B. Watson and Rosalie Rayner. So they worked at a hospital and they were trying to figure out how fears are learned. Are fears conditioned? And more importantly, are they classically conditioned? Spoiler alert, yes, they are. So we're only born with two fears in our, like, as a child. We're only born with two fears. Anything on top of that, like if you're afraid of snakes or spiders or the dark, that has been conditioned. But our two fears are loud noises and like falling, the fear of like falling. Here's the thing though. They took this baby, and do I have a picture of the baby? See, that's the picture that's unavailable. Okay, here we go. Here's a picture. They took this baby, and they know that we naturally have a fear of loud noises. So, what they did is they paired these loud noises that we naturally have a fear of. They paired, technically this loud noise is they have this metal rod and they would hit this metal rod with a hammer. So really loud. They paired loud noise with a rat. We do not have a natural fear of rats. That is, if you are afraid of rats, I'm about to sneeze. Okay, good. If you are afraid of rats, that's learned. And so what they were trying to do is they were trying to instill a fear of rats into baby Albert. So every time they put this rat in this baby's lap, and you can actually find videos of this experiment on YouTube, like they filmed it, they recorded it. It's from the 1950s. They put this rat in this baby's lap, and the rat kind of like walks away, and the baby's kind of interested, kind of not interested, has no fear. In fact, they like test this baby's fears on several things. They put like a piece of newspaper on fire right in front of the baby, and the baby was just trying to grab at it. Baby's not afraid of anything except for loud noises. So what they did is that they had this rat in front of the baby, in front of baby Albert, and as soon as the baby would like try to touch the rat in front of him, they would hit the metal rods together, scaring the baby. And eventually they did this pairing so often that just the mere sight of the rat caused the baby to cry. And the baby tries to like get away from the rat at this point. And it wasn't just rats. They put like a bunny that kind of, had the same coloring of the rat. Baby was terrified of the bunny. You see this picture here at the bottom. They put like a Santa mask on with like a beard that was like white and fuzzy, just like the rat. Baby was once again trying to run away and terrified of this beard. And so it wasn't just the fear of the rat, it became like it generalized to all these different things. Okay, so here's what I want our practice to be. I want you to, in your notes, and when we have our help, the time that I get on YouTube and I answer questions and you are there, hopefully watching, and it's live. It's not independent study. What is that called? My office hours, I guess. When my office hours are available, we'll go over the answers. And so I want you to say, what is the NS, UCS, UCR, CS, and CR of the baby Albert experiment? What's the neutral stimulus that before the experiment, the baby had no reaction to? What is the learned stimulus, the natural stimulus, the natural response to that stimulus, the learned stimulus, and the learned response? So there's 5 things. The thing before the experiment that had no reaction to, the natural thing and its natural reaction, and the learned, the associated thing, and the associated reaction to it. So NS, UCS, UCR, CS, and CR for the baby Albert experiment. And when I come live on probably Wednesday, I want to say Wednesday and Friday of each week, then I'll be going over. Okay, but going back. See, this is what we would have done in class. I have lemon juice or powder that makes you salivate. It makes you salivate. And I was going to read an article about Pavlov. And every time that I said the word Pavlov, you would dip the powder into your mouth. Of course, now that seems so insanitary and social distancing. But at the time, it would have made you eventually salivate to the name Pavlov all by itself. Okay. So here are, going back to Pavlov. So two big guys with classical conditioning, Pavlov, dogs, and John B. Watson, and that's with baby Albert. I guess you could say baby Albert's the third name, but he's not the psychologist. He's the patient. Yeah. Okay, so Pavlov realized there's 5 major conditioning processes. Parched. I'm actually sitting kind of in the sun, and it's kind of hot in this office. It's not even my office, it's my husband's office. See, we got stuff all over the walls, lots of golf stuff. There's the rest of my house. Anyway, thought you could get the tour while I'm taking a mental break. All right, so Pavlov realized that there are 5 major conditioning processes. The first one is acquisition. That is the very first time that the dog realizes, hey, that bell means food is coming. That's the first time that the neutral stimulus is turned into the conditioned stimulus. When that bell used to mean nothing, but oh my gosh, does that bell mean food is coming? And so that is acquisition, when finally learning has taken place, when the neutral stimulus becomes the conditioned stimulus. That's acquisition. It's the first time that you realize that smell reminds you of your grandmother. It's the first time that you realize that, it's the first time that your dog has realized, hey, that leash that they're grabbing, God, I'm going for a walk. It's the first time that you realize the nurse is all oh, it's that time of the year where we update our immunizations. And you're like, I'm pretty sure that means I'm going to get a shot. And then you realize, oh my gosh, I'm afraid of that. Okay. Extinction is eventually, if you ring that bell over and over and over and over and over again to that poor dog and you never present them with food, eventually they're going to stop salivating to that bell because the bell was anticipation of the food. But if the food never comes, then the bell doesn't mean anything. And so eventually something disappears. You know what would disappear? You would stop salivating to the bell eventually. So what is that when you salivate to the bell? But isn't that the conditioned response, the salivation to the bell? It's when the CR, the conditioned response, goes away. Why? Why would the CR go away? Why? What did I say? You ring a bell, ring a bell, ring a bell, but you never bring the meat powder. Eventually, you're going to stop salivating to the bell. The conditioned response goes away because you take away something. What would you take away? You would take away the meat powder, right? But what's the meat powder? It's the UCS, the unconditioned stimulus. Eventually, the conditioned response, the salivation to the meat powder, salivation to the bell. Sorry, you're always going to salivate to meat powder. It's meat powder. The salivation to a bell eventually goes away because you take away the UCS. You take away the meat powder. Eventually, the bell doesn't mean the meat powder is coming because you take away the meat powder. Like, next time, go get ready for to take your dog on a walk. Put your shoes on, get a leash, and then stand there by the door. And then eventually sit down, put the leash away, take your shoes off. If you do that 5 days in a row, eventually the dog is not going to care. The dog's not going to care. Maybe the first few days they're oh yeah, we're going for a walk, and they're going to be really disappointed. But maybe day 5 or day 6, you do that, the dog isn't going to get up and get excited anymore because they realize, well, that used to mean I was going for a walk, but doesn't mean anything anymore because you took away the walk. Okay, spontaneous recovery. All of a sudden, years pass. Calendar pages fall, the time on the clock, hands spin, years pass, and you haven't salivated to a bell in years. That's so long ago. But eventually, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the salivation to the bell comes back suddenly. After extinction, after it had gone away, then it comes back. And so salivation to the bell comes back. What are those letters? Salivation to the bell. Is it learned or is it unlearned? The bell's learned, so it's conditioned, and it's salivation, so that's a response. The CR comes back. It used to go away with extinction, but now the CR comes back. All of a sudden, you're salivating to a bell. You didn't even think about it anymore. Generalization. And the next one kind of goes, they're like opposites. Let me do generalization first. Generalization is I salivate to a bell, but then the doorbell goes off. And that was similar enough to the bell that I originally salivated at. And so you salivate to things that are similar. So you have a response, you have a conditioned response to similar stimuli. Salivating to a bell, that's just classical conditioning. But if your dog your dog barks at the door when someone's at the door, someone rings the bell, the dog barks. But has your dog ever done that when the doorbell rings on TV? Or when you knock on the wall or something, or the table, and they go crazy? I wonder if I can. Do you hear my dog? He's barking out there now. He thinks, he has been generalized. Any knocking sound means that the door is here. He's acting crazy. There he is. What can I get? Oh, there.
Is that for Charlie?
Yeah. Oh, hold on. I was teaching something. That was a teaching moment.
Oh.
Yes.
Charlie, that's mommy.
Oh,
Want
gosh.
to see mommy? There she is.
Okay, now I've completely disrupted the whole learning process. All right, I'll close the door here. Okay. Hey, Charlie. Where are you? There you are, Charlie. Whoop, whoop, whoop. I can't figure that out. Charles. Oh, you going back out again? Oh well. I'm almost done here. So if you have a response to something similar, not the same thing, but like something similar, okay, so let's say, remember how I said that like red Gatorade kind of makes me nauseous because I associate it with being sick? What if I was like, okay, I have orange Gatorade, and then that also makes me feel sick? That's generalization. Because I didn't learn the association to orange, I learned it to red, but orange is just close enough that it also makes me feel a little nauseous. And discrimination. Discrimination is the opposite. It's like the dog will salivate to bells, but then your phone goes off and it's kind of like a bell tone, but your dog's like, that's a different bell. I'm not salivating to that. Or if I drink like red Gatorade, I feel nauseous. I drink blue Gatorade and I'm like, I'm fine. I have realized that similar stimuli don't elicit a response. Doesn't elicit a conditioned response. Similar stimuli doesn't do anything. So, we said how we learned our fears through classical conditioning. So talking about baby Albert again, the first time that baby, he's like 6-7 months old, that toddler, whatever, that child, the first time he associated that rat is terrifying, that's acquisition. Eventually, if you're to keep presenting the rat, eventually the fear is going to go away. And that is how they get rid of fears in therapy. It's like with exposure therapy. They expose you to the thing that you're afraid of, and eventually you'll stop being afraid of it. Slowly by slowly. But maybe years down the road, baby Albert is walking through, PetSmart. And he sees like the cages of like little animals, and he looks over and sees a rat, and immediately he's filled with dread. Okay, that's spontaneous recovery. It had been so long since he thought about rats and was afraid of rats, but all of a sudden, bam, he's back to being afraid of rats. Of course, look at him here. He's being terrified from a Santa mask. He has generalized his fear not just from rats to like bunnies, but rats to cats and dogs and other fuzzy things like the Santa mask. But if maybe you gave the baby like a soft blanket, maybe the baby has no reaction to the soft blanket because even though it's similar, it's not going to elicit the same response because it's not that similar. It's more dissimilar than anything. So one last thing, I feel. No, don't click. Okay, good. Okay, yes, this is the last thing I want to say. Aversive conditioning. Aversive conditioning is when you classically condition yourself to do something to not like something. When if anyone in class is a nail biter, I bet your parents have probably like put that nail polish stuff on you to stop making you bite your nails. It's like a bittery, spicy taste. I've heard. I don't know. I don't bite my nails, but it's supposed to give you a negative association to biting your nails. So biting your nails before gave you a feeling of like satisfaction and pleasure, and you enjoy doing it. But then they add something negative. They like put something negative to make you not want to bite your nails. That's supposed to be aversive conditioning. It's supposed to work. I know that up until, I want to say 10, 15 years ago, if you were in prison for, I think they probably just had it for like pedophilia crimes. Like if you were a rapist, they had this treatment that you could sign up for. They no longer do it because it's considered like cruel and abusive and not good. But they basically would try to aversively condition you to not be like attracted to children anymore. They would essentially hook you up to like a car battery and then show you pictures of children, and then shock you. So then you would have like a negative feeling towards children because you've associated this pain from this car battery hooked up to you, to pictures of children. I don't know how, if that works, because I mean, I don't know if that works, but I probably not. I don't know. I know that I've had a lot of students say like, "Oh, my mom has tried that nail thing for me to stop biting my nails, and oh, I just chewed it off and I was fine." It's like, well, that defeats the purpose. But that's classical conditioning. So remember, you need to know UCS, UCR, CS, and CR. You also need to know these terms and how they apply to examples of classical conditioning. So I'm actually going to post some questions to this assignment, and if you could answer them and then turn them in on Google Classroom, along with making, I erased it. I had written UCS, UCR, CS, and CR for John B. Watson and Baby Albert. So hopefully you'll have the answers to that when we have our session together, and whatever. So I am signing off for now. I want to make sure that everything is good. Hold on. Where's my thing? Whatever. I think I'm done. Where's the button to make me stop? Oh well. I think I can just do it from here, I think. Anyway, I'll see you guys later and have a good afternoon.